You know that feeling when you check your savings account and see that number sitting there and you feel responsible, mature, like you're doing the right thing, like you've got your life together, while everyone else is blowing their paycheck on nonsense. I hate to be the one to tell you this, but that feeling is lying to you. That money you've worked so hard to save, that money you sacrificed for, that money you feel genuinely proud of it is losing value every single day it sits in that account. Not slowly, not in some distant theoretical future. Right now, this month, while you sleep. My name is Gaga, and I spend way too much time thinking about the financial systems that most people never question because they seem so obviously safe. If you want to understand what's actually happening to your savings, and more importantly, what to do about it, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it ends up saving you from one of the most expensive mistakes in personal finance. Before we get into the math, and trust me, the math is going to make you uncomfortable, let me ask you something. What is the point of a savings account? Most people would say, keep my money safe. And that sounds completely reasonable. That's the whole pitch. Savingsaccount.safe.secure. FDIC insured. Nothing bad can happen. But here's the thing nobody tells you when you open that account at 22 years old and start feeling responsible. There are two ways to lose money. The obvious way where the number on your screen goes down, and the invisible way where the number stays the same. What it can actually buy gets smaller and smaller every single year. The first kind of loss is visible. It's painful. It triggers action. Nobody lets their checking account drain to zero without doing something about it. The second kind of loss, it's silent. It's invisible. And it is absolutely destroying the wealth of millions of Americans who think they're being responsible. That invisible thief has a name. It's called inflation. Here's how it actually works. Inflation is the rate at which prices rise across the economy over time. The Federal Reserve targets roughly 2%. Inflation annually as a healthy baseline. In recent years, Americans have lived through inflation running at 7, 8, even 9%. And right now, even as inflation has cooled from those peaks, it's still running meaningfully above what your savings account is paying you. Let me put real numbers on this because this is where it gets painful. The average traditional savings account at a big bank in America, we're talking Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, pays somewhere between 1% and 5% interest annually. Let's be generous and call it 0.5%. If inflation is running at 3%, which is actually on the low end of what Americans have experienced recently, your savings account is effectively paying you negative to 0.5% in real terms. What does that actually mean in dollars? If you have $10,000 in a traditional savings account, earning 0.5% while inflation runs at 3%, after 1 year you'll have $10,050 in the account. Feels fine, right? The things that $10,000 could buy a year ago now cost $10,300. You need $300 more just to buy the same stuff. Instead of $300 more, you got $50 in interest. You are effectively $250 poorer in real terms. Even though the number in your account went up, now scale that over 10 years. $10,000 sitting in a traditional savings account at 0.5% interest, while inflation averages just 3%, annually grows to about $10,511 in nominal terms. Sounds okay, but in real purchasing power, that $10,000 in today's dollars is now worth only about $7,374. You've lost over $1,600 in real wealth, not because anything went wrong, not because the market crashed, not because you made a bad decision, simply because you did nothing. And here's the part that really should make you angry. The banks know this. They know exactly what they're doing. When you deposit money in a savings account, the bank doesn't just sit on it. They lend it out to home buyers at 7% mortgage rates, to businesses at 8 to 10%, to credit card holders at 20%. The bank is making double-digit returns on your money, and they're paying you 0.5% for the privilege of using it. You are the product. Your savings are the raw material, and the return you're getting is designed to feel like something while actually being almost nothing. Now, some of you might be thinking, what about high-yield savings accounts? And yes, this is genuinely where it gets more interesting. High-yield savings accounts, typically offered by online banks like Ally, Marcus, or Sophie, have been paying 4 to 5% annually during recent high-interest rate environments. And that's genuinely better during periods when the Fed funds rate is elevated. A high-yield savings account can actually keep pace with or slightly outpace inflation. But here's what you need to understand about those rates. They are not permanent. They are not guaranteed. They are entirely tied to the Federal Reserve's interest rate policy. Well, when the Fed cuts rates, and they do cut rates, sometimes aggressively, those high-yield savings account rates fall right along with them. The bank is not your friend. They're not going to keep paying you 5% when the environment no longer forces them to compete for your deposits. So yes, a high-yield savings account is the right place for your emergency fund. For money you need access to within the next 1 to 2 years. For short-term savings goals, absolutely. Use a high-yield account and get every basis point you can. But here's the critical mistake that millions of Americans make. They treat the high-yield savings account as a destination instead of a waiting room. Hit $20. Zero in savings. Feel great about the 4% they're earning and stop there. And then inflation compounds quietly in the background, and the Fed cuts rates. And that 4% becomes 3%, then to percent, and suddenly they're right back in the same trap, just with a slightly better looking number on a different app. The real question, the question nobody asks when they open a savings account, isn't is my money safe? It's what is this money supposed to be doing for me long term? Because if the answer is growing real wealth over time, and for most people under 50, it should be, then a savings account of any kind is the wrong tool. Full stop. Think about what inflation-adjusted returns look like across different asset classes over the last 30 years. A savings account has delivered close to zero real return, and in many periods, negative real returns. Bonds have delivered modest positive real returns. A simple, boring S&P 500 index fund has historically delivered roughly 7% annually in real inflation-adjusted terms. Let's run those numbers side by side. $10,000 invested 30 years ago in a savings account at historical average rates, accounting for inflation. You've maybe preserved your purchasing power, if you were lucky with the timing, in a basic S&P 500 index fund. That $10,000 has grown to approximately $76,000 in today's dollars. Same starting point, completely different outcomes. The difference isn't intelligence or financial sophistication. The difference is where the money lived. Now, I want to be very careful here because this is where financial content usually goes off the rails. I'm not telling you to take your emergency fund and throw it into the stock market. That's genuinely bad advice. The market can drop 30 to 40% in a recession. And if your emergency fund is in equities and you lose your job at the same time, which historically tends to happen together, you are in a genuinely catastrophic situation. The emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of living expenses, belongs in a high-yield savings account. That's not negotiable. That money needs to be stable and accessible. But everything beyond the emergency fund, that is money that should be working, not sitting, not being safe, working. For most people, that looks like this. Max out your 401k at least to the employer match. That's a guaranteed 50 to 100% return on day one. Then max out a Roth IRA if you're eligible. Tax-free growth for decades. Both of these accounts let you invest in index funds that historically beat inflation by a wide margin over long time horizons. After those, tax-advantaged buckets are full. A taxable brokerage account with low-cost index funds is still infinitely better for long-term wealth building than a savings account with any interest rate. Here's what I want you to take away from this. The savings account isn't evil. It has a role. A specific, limited, important role. Emergency fund, short-term goals. Money you'll need within 24 months for that purpose. Use it. Optimize it. Get the best rate you can. But the moment you start treating it as a long-term wealth-building strategy, you've fallen into exactly the trap the financial system set for you. The trap that feels responsible. The trap that feels safe. The trap that keeps millions of hardworking Americans exactly where they are financially for decades. The most dangerous financial decisions aren't the ones that feel obviously risky. They're the ones that feel completely safe while quietly costing you everything. Your savings account feels like security. In reality, for money you won't need for years, it's just a slower way to fall behind. Start treating your money like it has a job to do, because it does. And right now, for a lot of people, that job is sitting in a break room collecting almost nothing.